Hi guys, it's Teresa. Welcome back to my channel. If you've already seen my top 10 best books of the decade video, if not, I'll link it below. You will already recognize the format of this video where basically I'm gonna tell you the worst books of the 2010s by the year that I've read the book. So I basically picked the worst book I've read for every single year of the decade. As I already explained in the other video, the first few years of the decade are mainly guesswork because I didn't have Goodreads back then and I didn't keep track of what I was reading. But these are sort of an estimation of the worst books I read in those years. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to bear with me on that one. By the way, go to my best books of the decades video if you want more additional information on what I did in those years. So let's get started. The worst book I read in 2010 or somewhere around there was Magic. This book is the first in a series called Septimus Heap, and I only read it because a friend of mine recommended it to me because this was one of her favorite series. I think it's like middle grade, and it's just so weird. It follows like the seventh son of a seventh son, and it's like fantasy and strangeness. I only remember there was a gargoyle somewhere in the story, and I just didn't like it. I saw on Goodreads, like when I retrospectively added these in 2014, I gave it 1 star, but I didn't write a review, so I don't entirely know why I hated it. I just remember I did not like it. I don't know. I can't say why, but I did not like this one at all. In 2011, my least favorite book, I think, was The Chosen. It's a Night World novel not by PC and Kristen Cast. That's another series. That's the House of Night series. This is the Lisa L.J. Smith or something like that series. This is a really interesting world in which like all the paranormal like creatures that you can imagine basically exist, and every single book is the same. Like it follows just 2 people that are soulmates finding each other, and I enjoyed this like extremely tropey, extremely formulaic formula for a few books, but apparently when I got to this one, I was so over it. I couldn't handle it. I just did not enjoy it. It just seemed very much like copy paste over and over and over again, like regurgitating the same story, and I was just bored to tears by it. And yeah, the soulmate thing does get old eventually. My least favorite book of 2012 was The Magicians by Lev Grossman. This is when I started my channel, and this is one of the first videos I ever did. It's a rant video for The Magicians, I think. Okay, I just checked, and it's literally the 3rd video I ever did. So that was starting my channel off on the right foot, I think. But this book just reminded me a lot of Harry Potter. The main character gets to go to this like magical school, but he's just such an unlikable main character. I hated him. He was really, really whiny, and I just hated him, and I hated the book because it didn't seem that original to me. I guess theoretically you can go watch that video if you care to see baby Teresa try to explain why she hated this book, but there it is. It's out there. You can watch it. I'm not gonna stop you if you really want to. Please don't. As I already said in my best books of the decade video, the reason I had 2 best books for 2013 is because I also had 2 worst books for 2013 that I genuinely couldn't decide between, and I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to decide. I wanted to talk about both because these are the books that like are quintessential review videos on my channel, okay? They're just the start of it all. I said it was The Magicians, but no, it's Throne of Glass and Obsidian. I read Throne of Glass while I was in England, and I didn't even know rant videos were a thing, but I did it. I made one. I had a fun time. I was like really salty about it. I hated the book. And then when I did Obsidian, it was a while later. I was already back in Vienna, and this was also around a time when I was really into doing skit videos. Like I did a bunch of skit videos on YouTube. I wish I still had that like creativity and that. I don't even know what made me do it, but I needed this outlet. Like I wanted to do these skit videos, so I did a bunch of them. And there's a skit at the beginning of the Obsidian review, and it's so horrible. Like, I think it's funny still, but it's also so horrible because it's very special. It's a very special video. So I had to mention them both, okay? Because they're both garbage books. And the Obsidian skit is the best thing I ever did on YouTube, and I stand by that forever and ever. Okay. For 2014, I'm picking Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo as the worst book, mainly because I know it was the most disappointing for sure, and I don't really know what other books I read that year that I didn't enjoy. This to me was the worst kind of ending. I was shipping Alina into Darkling so much. Like, I thought this was gonna be the book that like did it, you know, like made the bad guy come together and like turn into the dark side, like what Kylo Ren and Rey should have been. They didn't. It ended horribly and I was really sad and I didn't enjoy it. My worst book of 2015, I just wrote down Dark Fever. I think this is a book by Karen Marie Moning, and oh god, even her name is like already so indicative of what's wrong with these books. I only read like half of this. I don't even think I finished it, but I violently hated it. This is basically fae erotica. I don't know why this is so beloved by so many people because it's genuinely bad. Like, I hated the characters. I hated everything. It was so cringy. It was impossible to read. I just couldn't keep reading. And I hated everything about this. I know a lot of people like actually recommend the series. When I said I hated The Cruel Prince, people were like, read this book. And I was like, no, I tried once and it was a bad experience. So nope, I'm not doing that again. For 2016, I honestly didn't read that much because I was in Japan. And so I think though my worst book of the year was Ice Like Fire by Sarah Rash. This is a sequel to Snow Like Ashes. And I really did enjoy the first book, but the second one was horrible. I even did a rant video on this while I was in Japan. No, I wanted to read my review on Goodreads, but it's literally just a link to the video. I'm not about to watch that. You can if you want to. I'll link it maybe. I don't know. But basically, I hated this as a sequel. I think it was just not a good book. I mean, and then we get to the last 3 years, which gloriously, I actually did worst books of the year video off, so I don't have to do that much research or like brain thinking to try and figure out which were the worst books. But the worst of 2017 was for sure Artemis by Andy Weir. Hated the book, violently hated it. I also did a video on this one. I think Andy Weir is just incapable of writing good female characters. It was so dull and boring and just like shit characterization. Horrible. Didn't like it at all. My worst book of 2018 was Illuminated by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. I mean, we all know how I feel about this. I did like a rant video ages ago where I like dissect the book in a lot of detail because I just don't think it's good. I don't think it deserves any hype or anything that it gets. Like, it's just not that great. I hate the dialogue in this particularly because the characters just don't talk like real people talk. And it's so forced. Like, I hate when adults try to like mimic teenage language and it just fails so hard. And that's essentially what this book is. Like, that's the epitome of what this book is. So and then finally, my worst book of 2019. You can go watch that video if you haven't seen it yet, where I count down basically from least worst to worst, the worst books of the year. But the one that definitely takes the cake is The Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman. I'm sorry, this is not a good book. This book has absolutely all over the place plot. Nothing makes sense. It was not thought through. I ended up having more questions that I went into it with. It wasn't well constructed. It's just basically a whole mess that I did not enjoy in the least. I'm glad if you enjoyed it more, but for me, this is like just genuinely one of the worst like plotted through books that I've ever read. And that brings us to the end of the worst books of the decade video. I know I went through these kind of quickly, but in my best books of the decade video, I also talk a little bit more about what kind of I was doing at the time of reading these books, like how my life developed over the last 10 years. So if you're curious about that video is a little bit longer. There's a little bit extra information in there. I will link it everywhere if you haven't seen it yet. But thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments what was the worst books that you read in the 2010s. Leave them down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, watch more videos on the screen right now, and I hope to see you back very soon. Have a lovely week. Bye!